Hello everyone and welcome to our LinkedIn Live. I'm Kerry Deering, VP of International for NetDocuments, and we're really excited today to talk to you about context matters, what happens when legal AI projects can go wrong. And I've got two great guests with me today, Dan and Colleen, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Colleen Barron. I'm a Legal Solutions Director at NetDocuments. And prior to this role, I was a Senior Associate at Freshfield. So everything that I talk about today is really underpinned by that experience. In my current role at NetDocs, my focus is on connecting the legal mind with the tech one and really helping lawyers understand how they can integrate AI into their daily workflows.
I'm Dan Houck, Chief Product Officer at NetDocuments. I've been with the company for over 8 years. We've grown a lot over that time, now serving over 7,000 customers in about every geo region on the globe.
Absolutely. And you both have very interesting backgrounds, both practicing lawyers in previous lives that kind of bring you to NetDocuments. So Dan, you came to NetDocuments via your own startup and a career in law. What made you trade practicing law for product?
I did really like practicing. I enjoyed it. There's so much interesting about it. It's intellectually challenging. The people are really amazing colleagues and so forth. But what I found is that as I worked over 6 or 7 years practicing, the projects I liked the most had the most to do with technology. There was like a technology element to them that I was able to bring in, and it became clear to me that that was one of the things that I wanted to do, was figure out how to be able to bring law and technology together more closely. Practice of law is adversarial, and so that can be fun at times, but ultimately product is about building, and it's about creating great outcomes for your customers and hopefully for the legal profession, and that's what I have a chance to do here at NetDocuments.
Absolutely. And Colleen, as a legal solutions director, you sit closest to how firms work. And what does a good day look like for the legal teams that you support?
I'd say a good day is when a lawyer is fully oriented on a matter from the moment they sit down. And I think that is really a lot harder than it sounds, because legal work is extraordinarily specific. You need to know your client's risk appetite, your counterparty's preferred negotiating position. You need to know what was agreed on a similar transaction 18 months ago. So getting oriented on a matter is really about understanding that full picture. And a lot of the times that information is there in the documents that you're working with or in a lawyer's head. The difficulty is access. And so the counter to that, the bad day for a lawyer, is when all that information is there, but they can't access it. So they spend hours looking for it, or they have to proceed without it and reinvent the wheel. So my focus is really on closing the gap between those days and helping them have all of the information that they need at the moment that they need it.
Great, thanks. And you both bring a wealth of experience, and so we've got a Q&A box on the screen, so any questions that anyone has, please post them in there, and we're hoping to get a few of them at the end. If not, we'll make sure we follow up with any answers. But we've all just had the privilege of coming out of an executive briefing with discussions with many legal professionals, and so I know you've got a few good insights that you're able to share from that. So what is that kind of one insight from that talk earlier on today, particularly around where AI is and isn't living up to what firms expected?
I think the frustration can also be the gap between what AI can do generally and what it can do for a specific firm, because AI is often very good at producing impressive general results, but that's not the same as understanding your firm, your clients and your history. So firms are getting generic value when they really need specific value, and I think that's something that a strong data foundation and context can help address.
Yeah, and when I think about kind of the challenges some people run into, oftentimes what I find is that there's an opportunity to kind of like iterate more with the models so that you can, say, hey, I'm not satisfied with this answer. What about in this instance? Or what about if I provide this additional context to you? One of the things that we're focused on at NetDocuments is making sure that that context is available so that people don't run into those barriers very quickly. But I think those are some of the things that we tend to find can be a frustration point. But then once people kind of have those magic unlocks, it really changes the way that they start to engage with AI.
One of the things that was really interesting to me is just how prevalent AI is in conversations that are happening at an internal level as well. So kind of bringing that into meetings that people are doing and performance reviews, and really encouraging that use of AI on a daily basis as well. So really nice to see that from the top down to try and be embraced. Yeah. And what did you hear that firms were most excited about?
I think in terms of excitement is that when AI works, it really works well and it can add a lot of value to the firms. So we heard a couple of very specific case studies earlier today where firms had applied it, and they've applied it in customized way designed for specific use cases for specific teams. And it really improved efficiency and added a lot of value to those teams. And then when you have success stories like that, then it opens up more avenues of way to replicate that across the firm.
Yeah, one of those examples I thought was really interesting. I was hearing it for the first time, but it was one of our customers who had basically NetDocuments allows you to rename emails. So we don't change the email itself. It's still the exact same email. So if you were to have to forensically produce it for some reason, it's still perfectly there. But inside the system, you can name it. And oftentimes users do that and lawyers do that because, as you know, sometimes the subject line of the email starts to drift pretty substantially from what the email is all about. And people will rename them in order to get something that's more accurate. So when they're trying to find it later, they can. Well, this firm had actually been doing that as a practice, but they have been having administrative assistants do it or other folks do it. And what they found is that they can actually run their email filing system at scale and use NetDocuments LLM to be able to automatically change that name of the email based upon what the content of the email is. And so they're doing that at scale. It's really impressive to see. And it's one of those things that nobody has to really do anything. They just have to file the email and they get the benefits of this every time they use NetDocuments.
And it's so nice to be in an environment like that where you have people sharing different ways that they're using AI to kind of get that creativity amongst a peer group. But as many success stories there are also other firms that are not quite as mature on that journey yet. And some of the AI projects may have broken down or disappointed. And when it does break down, is it the technology itself or is it something underneath it that's usually driving that?
I think it kind of depends on the point of failure. You could see both. I think often firms do make the mistake of turning the AI on before that foundation is ready. Often you'll see that the tool is working as expected, but the data that it's being fed is bad. So I think before you ever start using AI, you should check your foundation first, ensure documents are stored where they should be, your metadata is consistent and accurate, knowledge capture is there, and you're going to get a lot more value out of those AI tools than otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's right. And again, oftentimes what we see is that you have to be able to let it have all that rich context. So one of the things that we try to do at NetDocuments is do really deep metadata hydration in order to build that foundation. So when a document lands inside of NetDocuments, not only might you have something that if it's an email, rename the email, but regardless of what kind of piece of content it is, let's identify it. Let's figure out, is this an agreement? Is this a brief that's filed with the court? Is this an advisory letter or opinion? And those are the sorts of things that then, once you kind of have that top level document identification, then you can go in and with specific metadata fields say, all right, if this is an agreement, when was it executed? Who are the parties? When does it renew? What's the governing law? All sorts of rich information that becomes this knowledge substrate that then is helpful for if a lawyer is performing a search across a bunch of documents, or if an agent is doing a search. And by the way, that's really important for the agent to be able to find the right documents too. It needs to be able to find those and be able to read them to provide an accurate and intelligent answer.
Now, there's a number of practical examples in there, but the title of today's session is What Most Legal AI Projects Get Wrong. And from everything you're both seeing, what are some of the key things that should be considered when firms are bringing in AI to get it right?
I think the foundation is a big one, and we've already discussed a little bit about that. But I think the other key consideration is your governance and your AI policy. a high number of firms are introducing AI to their environments without having that policy, and it's extremely important, especially for law firms and legal environments, to have that, because it is going to ensure that all of your documents are compliant and securely stored. And it's also going to assist your lawyers as well, telling them when they can and cannot use AI, what they can and cannot use AI for, which tools can use client data and which can't, is extremely important. So I think that's one thing that firms really need to focus on.
Yeah, and making sure that your data is, you have that source of truth. And I think that's why a lot of people that we speak with are really excited about the things that we're doing, because it allows NetDocuments to be a source of truth. It avoids the need to duplicate content across many different systems, because when you do that, there is the risk of governance drift. There is the risk of, well, we changed the security access over here, but we now have to change it in 5 other systems. But when you have a secure platform that you're already running all your governance through, like NetDocuments, then you can connect up new technologies like MCP in order to securely provide context to other solutions, but that context isn't in the form of document duplication, and it also respects all of the kind of access controls that need to be in place. So if I'm a user, I can't use AI in order to get around those access controls and access documents and content that I otherwise wouldn't be allowed to have.
So NetDocuments has launched the world's first legal context graph, and we say that context is the difference between AI that works and AI that doesn't. And so what do we actually mean when we talk about context, and why do a firm's documents sit right at the heart of it?
I think context is almost everything that an LLM doesn't know about you by default. So your clients, your best practices, your precedents, all of that information about a matter that would typically just live inside of a lawyer's head. And the documents and data are really at the heart of it, because in a physical form, that's where all of that information lives. And what the context graph does is it uses AI to extract that and then make it available to the lawyer. And I think it's important to mention it does it in 2 forms, through like the matter overview itself, so they can see it visually, but then it also informs any AI tools that you use. So your AI tools are working with that context, and they're becoming better and more accurate as a result.
Yeah, if you think about what agents are, we were kind of joking that they're like a goldfish, or maybe the main character from Memento. They don't remember they don't have no memory, right? And so it kind of has to go, anytime you ask it a question, it has to go out and build that context manually. It has to go and retrieve documents. It has to read them, maybe then realize there might be another piece missing, or maybe it doesn't realize that there's a piece missing. And the beauty of what we're doing with the legal context graph is that we're supplying all of that context so that the agent doesn't have to go and manually reconstruct it every single time you want to ask a question. And what that means is you're going to have a more efficient agent, but you're also going to have a more accurate agent as well. And that's really important. We're actually testing that. We're going to have some of the results from that later next month that we're really excited to share in more detail. But what I can share today is that we're seeing dramatically improved accuracy when you give an agent a set of questions and you supply it with the legal context graph from NetDocuments versus when you don't. And I think that's really meaningful, because it is the difference between maybe a good outcome for a client and a great outcome. It could be the difference between malpractice and not. So getting it right is super important, and the legal context graph allows us to do that with agents together.
And you touched on it a little bit earlier, and that is all around making sure that the foundations are strong, that you're building the context on top of. And so what does a strong document foundation actually look like in practice? And what separates a firm that's genuinely AI ready from one that isn't?
I think a strong document foundation has at its core, unsurprisingly, a firm's proprietary documents and data. And then the question is, how do you take that and make it work for you? So what the NetDocs context graph does is it surrounds that core with a layer of context. And we've talked a little bit about what that means, but it's when a document enters the NetDocs system, it's automatically classified and profiled, and it informs all the answers that AI provides. And it's searchable by meaning and concept rather than just keyword. And then around that layer, you have all the capabilities that put that information to work for you. So things like no-code apps that automate workflows, agents that perform tasks autonomously, governance, perhaps one of the more important ones, ensuring everything is secure and compliant, and then connectivity, so turning outwards through MCP, allowing the firms to connect any other AI tool they use to this foundation, and then all of those tools get the benefit of that context layer.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done, which I think is really fascinating, is that we built a whole new experience that leverages it's basically a visualization of this context graph, and it lets a lawyer, and Colleen kind of hit on this earlier, but like lets the lawyer come in. It's the cockpit view of the matter. What's going on? What's the summary? Who are the key players? What's been the activities that have been going on? And what's fascinating is all of that is extracted data. It's things that you get just by virtue of putting your documents into NetDocuments. And so I think that's like a really powerful visualization that we can now provide and that people can see. But to Colleen's point, like we're also making it available to our own agents and to third-party agents to be able to be more effective.
Yeah, and ND Max lets lawyers query across all of their documents, but that only pays off when the documents underneath are in good order. And so getting them in good order is so important. And for the skeptical lawyer who's heard plenty of AI hype, what does that actually do for them on a Monday morning when the documents are in good order and the foundation is right?
I think I mentioned this before, but legal work is extraordinarily specific. So, it's this client, this jurisdiction, this matter, even this partner. And so getting oriented on a matter isn't just locating the documents, it's understanding that full picture. And there is a time cost to that, and that time cost compounds across all associates. So I think for the skeptical lawyer, that moment is really when they ask an AI tool a question in a natural language format, and they get a response back that's embedded in their own firm's institutional knowledge, something that's relevant to their client that they can act on immediately, and importantly with a citation to verify.
Yeah, and it's funny because I work in this stuff all the time with our team. It's really like I'm very familiar with it, but even I had one of those aha moments when I was looking for a presentation that I'd given, and so I opened up our assistant and I said, hey, I'm looking for a presentation. I think I gave it in 2023. I was to this company. There was an example in there that looked kind of like this. Can you find it? And within 15 seconds, it found the exact document that before would have been me doing multiple searches to try to put together the right set of keywords and so forth. And so it was just so amazing to have had that kind of practical experience. And the thing was, then you could also, and I actually did just to test it, replicate that same query inside of Claude because we have an MCP connection to Claude. I asked the same question and it found the same document. So again, having that information in order lets you get to great outcomes. And the other piece of this that you hit on was that semantic search piece. And that's something that's really important because lawyers, they don't oftentimes know the specific matter or the specific place to look, the right folder to ask the question. They need to be able to just go to their document repository and ask the question and know that it can find it across thousands, or realistically, we have customers who have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of documents. And I think we're uniquely positioned in being able to serve up semantic search across that scale of documents. And again, that's super useful for a lawyer. It's really useful for an agent.
And the other pillar of that is profiling as well, and using AI to get your documents ready for AI. And so how does that kind of profiling piece work at NetDocuments?
So NetDocuments has come up with their own taxonomy that is almost like a set of metadata fields that you can use to extract that relevant data from your documents. And it's customizable. So if you've got people in different practice areas, they'll have a different set of terms that are extracted from their data. And the great thing about AI profiling at NetDocs is that it's done automatically. And as a former lawyer, in my 8 years, I never once ever thought about metadata. Never. But it's so rich and so valuable when it comes to AI because it really can extract all of this information, and not just the things that you'd expect like matter, jurisdiction, dates, but clauses. What particular type of clause is this? And that's incredibly valuable when you're searching because you're often looking for a needle in the haystack. You don't just want, a particular document. You want a document with these parties on it in this jurisdiction with this particular clause.
And we based that taxonomy on industry leading solutions like Sally and Folio. So a lot of that DNA is embedded into it, which we know people really like and appreciate. And also we're leveraging LLMs to do this work in past iterations, and in other technologies, they're still using machine learning as the approach, which we all know is really brittle. It requires a huge number of training documents, and it's really not possible to customize it to your exact instance and be able to test it immediately. We do this kind of work, we deal with this kind of documents, we need these kind of pieces of data extracted. Like, let's be able to do that really quickly. We're working with firms today to be able to do that, and it's incredibly powerful to see that. And this is, the kind of the power of when you unlock a system of scale, like NetDocuments, with the expertise of our customers.
Yeah. And I think we can all agree that AI is moving so fast, but how do you balance how fast that's moving with the security and trust that legal clients expect and demand?
So I think you really cannot compromise on the latter to get the former. And I think that the firms doing this correctly are the ones that realize that security and trust isn't a brake on AI adoption. It's a forcing mechanism to get the foundation correct. Because if you can't answer the questions, what data can this tool see? How does it handle your documents? Does it store them? Who can see the output, and how do you verify that output? Then you shouldn't be scaling that product, because these are the questions that regulators and clients are going to ask when it goes wrong. So the firms that are moving the fastest and the safest on AI are the ones that treat those questions as a precondition, not an afterthought, because really security and speed don't have to be in tension if you've done that groundwork initially.
That's a great answer.
So as we look at the NetDocuments customer base, we've seen a huge growing presence in our EMEA and APAC customers. And what have you seen those international clients ask for, and how does that shape the roadmap?
I think of particular focus here is data residency and governance and auditability. And that's of concern for firms and organizations globally, but the regulatory landscape here makes it a particular focus. So I think that really needs to be a starting point for firms. And this is where NetDocuments' 26-year history really comes into play, because our company has always thought about security and ethical walls from day one. So when you're using our AI products, you're also getting that 26-year history of security and compliance.
Yeah, we've thought about a lot of the issues that we know customers care about. Where is all of your AI inferencing happening? We have AI inferencing happening in the same regions of all of our service regions around the globe. So it's not like you might be in the UK and then your actual AI processing is happening over in the US because you're working with a vendor that has global inferencing. Yours is going to be happening in that same service region. And so things like that, but also policies that your firm might need to enforce. So for instance, there might be situations where you can't use AI with a particular client. We hear about that quite frequently still. And you have to have the tooling in place, just as you have ethical walls to ensure people can't access documents that they're not supposed to. We have DLP policies in place that prevent AI from accessing documents that it is barred from seeing.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And as we wrap up, just kind of a few last comments from you. But if you were betting individuals and you had to bet on one thing as to where AI is going to go over the next 3 years, what would that be?
I'm quite excited about AI agents, which I think firms need to be very careful about how they use them. But what I would think this looks like in practice is, you receive a first draft of an agreement from a counterparty. AI recognizes that, immediately runs it against your firm standard playbook, and that analysis is waiting for you the moment that you get up. And I think that's where we're heading, and firms can get ready for it now, because these agents are only going to be as good as the environments that they work in. So if you have one working in your DMS, it's going to be very powerful if it's using clean and well-governed data, but extremely dangerous if it's not. So the firms that get the most value safely out of agents are going to be the ones that start building that foundation now.
Yeah, and maybe I totally agree with that. And I would just maybe take a step back and say it's very hard to predict on, some of these things. But what I am confident in is that over the next 3 years, the firms that are making those investments that are really, climbing on board, hopefully you already are, and your strategy is moving forward, but you're going to have to continue to move at that pace. You're going to have to continue to invest in these AI, in the AI foundation, in making sure you understand your data, and also in the tooling that lets you take advantage of it. And if you do that, things are going to change with respect to pricing and how lawyers work and what pieces are done by lawyers and what's done by AI. But ultimately, continuing to move with that pace of change and continuing to adopt, especially today, sets you up for that future.
Great, thanks. And just to finish, one piece of advice for any legal team taking their first step into AI, where should they start before they switch the AI on?
I think they should start with an audit, and not of the AI tools, but of their information estate. Where is your document stored? Is the metadata clean and consistent? Are the proper ethical walls in place? And is the knowledge accessible to those who need it? And then be honest about what you find, because if your foundation isn't ready, AI is going to discover that, and it will be reflected in the answers that you get. So once you've identified those gaps, fix them, and that's really going to increase the specific value that a firm or organization is going to be able to get out of AI. So start with an audit, fix your foundation, and then you're really going to have something that AI can work with.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I would say, I don't know that you can get these things before you switch on AI. What we're seeing, of course, is that something like almost 80% of people are using it, whether or not it's sanctioned by their firm or that sort of thing. It's happening for sure. But for those firms, and we talked to some of them earlier today that are really concerned about the adoption question, that are concerned about how do we move this forward in the right way. One of the most effective things that we've seen is that the education oftentimes and the real aha moments, the real excitement and engagement that can come from using this technology doesn't come from your vendor. It doesn't come even from some of the knowledgeable staff that are inside the firm. It oftentimes comes from lawyers talking to other lawyers. And think about those moments where you can surface those opportunities, whether that's at your firm parties or maybe a more structured like lunch and learns and things like that, because that's where the knowledge is happening. That's where the excitement's happening. When you see someone down the hall who's doing something really interesting and you say, oh, okay, I can do something like that. Maybe if you should show me a couple of things, I can start to really progress. And so I think firms that are thinking about that are going to help everybody in the firm.
Great. And thank you for leaving everyone with that really practical advice there. I think we are right at time. Thank you for joining us today, and a big thank you to Dan and Colleen for taking part.